Good afternoon and welcome back to our part 3. So in part 3, this is the journey to carbon verification, and part 3 specific is greenhouse gas mitigation, reporting, removals and offsets as well. My name is Claire Braham and I am going to be your host this afternoon. So we have already looked at part 1 at the start of June. Part 1 was looking at the carbon quantification, mitigation and reporting. Part 2 then we done about 2 weeks ago, and that was on the getting started on your greenhouse gas reporting. So it's looking at your inventory, all your different elements of greenhouse gas emissions, conversion factors, and also establishing and reviewing base years. And today, part 3 is looking at your greenhouse gas mitigation, reporting, removals and offsets. So within this today, we will look at your planning for reductions, the options for removals and offsets, the pros and cons in that, preparing your greenhouse gas report and other documentation requirements, and lastly we will look at verification options and some case studies as well. So I know a lot of you have actually been on the other webinars for the last part 2 and part 1. So NQA and who we are, I think we have already went through it. We are one of the leading certification bodies within the UK, but also globally as well. Who am I? Oh, I don't know why it keeps flicking. So just to introduce myself, I am Claire Braham. I am one of the lead greenhouse gas verifiers within NQA, and I'm also a regional assessor for ISO 9000, 14001 and 45, and I do other standards as well. Within the greenhouse gas section, I do the PAS 2060, the ISO 14068, I also do for the greenhouse gas inventory as well, which is the ISO 14064, and we will also be going on to the PAS 2080 as well. Just of a little bit of a synopsis as well. I think the last time I was on, I was about to hit a graduation, so I have just recently graduated from Queen's University in Belfast, and that was another just postgrad in climate change, very specific this time to climate change. I think everybody, I don't know where everybody's obviously located, but I know where I live here, the weather is absolutely amazing today. So I know there's a lot of discussions over climate change, certainly at the moment with the way the weather is. So from this here, the learning objectives is to understand the opportunities for planning to reduce your carbon emissions, to gain an overview of carbon credits, so the pros and the cons of carbon removal and carbon offsets, to gain an overview of how best to prepare your greenhouse gas report and other suggested documentation requirements as well, and then to understand your options for verification of your carbon claims, and we will also look as well at some case studies. I am one of the lead greenhouse gas verifiers within NQA, as I spoke about, so we do be out in all different types of industries depending on our codes, and so I can certainly share some of what I have seen as well, not obviously name wise of the company, but just what we have seen best practice and some common mistakes we do see whenever we're doing greenhouse gas inventory verifications. So first up is planning to reduce your carbon emissions. Okay. So identifying and prioritising action to reduce your carbon emissions is worthwhile. And in summary, what I would always say, it links very well into anybody has got a standard, the ISO 14001 management system, which is your environmental management system. If we look at your monitoring and measurement, if we look at your significant aspects, they should all tie into objectives and targets. You're always looking to see the flow right through from your significant, or even if you don't have significant aspects in an organisation, even your medium aspects, how are you actually looking to manage those? Same with your monitoring and measurement, you're taking an element of control, and that obviously should be feeding into objectives and targets. Some of these objectives and targets will overlap with this section, and it's the ideal section for the overlap between 14,001 and any greenhouse gas verification that you are considering. So often, but not always, they correlate directly straight to the bottom line cost savings, and it has to be cost effective. If you go to any MD in an organisation and you're looking to reduce your carbon footprint, the first thing they're going to say is, how much is this going to cost me? So it's looking at that, and it's looking at your payback time, and it's looking at the added advantage and what is your payback time, as well as what is it going to cost and when is it going to be able to be paid off as well. So whilst the ISO 14064-1 does not mandate a carbon reduction plan, it is encouraged. It's one clause within 14064 is not mandatory. It is advisable, however, but it is not mandatory. It is encouraged, obviously, but not mandatory within that standard. So other greenhouse gas standards, such as your PAS 2060 and also then the ISO 14068-1, they do mandate a carbon reduction plan. So for example, I was out on a site yesterday conducting a PAS 2060, and within that site we're looking year-on-year reductions as well, whether that be absolute or intensity based. Overall looking at an absolute figure of a reduction. So your customers are and will become more interested in the scale of the emissions, and this is from your supplier evaluations, and more commonly require that under the PPN 06-21. So under PPN 06-21, this is a government scheme, and it is for any large procurement. Now the level of work carried out under that is actually reducing. So looking at that, and that's obviously putting a lot of focus on suppliers, and I think we had looked at this in our first section, looking at the supplier evaluations for that. So the consuming public, i.e. the end users, are more in tune with the carbon performance of products and services, as well as to dubious greenwashing claims. And we do hear this quite a bit whenever we're out in, whether I'm out in industry performing other audits, not necessarily verifications. People are quite conscious of greenwashing claims. Is it actually real? Is it getting what we need it to do? And I have to say, a lot more focus and a lot more emphasis is on kids at school, also for secondary schools, and also in universities. As I've spoke about, I just completed a course at Queen's University on climate change. Before this, I'd done one as well, another postgrad, and it was on hydrogen technologies, and the one before that was on zero carbon engineering. They were not in college, they were not courses that was available to me as a student whenever I first graduated. So I graduated, I'd done my degree in 97 and then done a master's and graduated in 98. Those courses did not exist. So it is how much life is changing as well, and how much more focus there is on carbon and carbon performance as well. So resilience and adaptation to climate change is a significant risk to many businesses. The most fear there is with a lot of organisations is, how can I change? How can I adapt? And it is a little bit of a standoff, just being very much aware that they think it's going to be something massive and it's going to cost them a lot of money. It doesn't necessarily, not if you're going to be quite smart with it. We also have got regulatory compliance is increasing, and I think anybody that will be on the call, even under the ISO, any of the ISO standards, part of that is now, whenever there was an amendment done last year, is climate change. Has it been considered within an organisation? So within regulatory compliance is increasing requiring carbon reductions. So we've got the ETS, so that's the UK Emissions Trading Scheme. So it's a cap and trade system designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by putting a limit on your total emissions and allowing companies to trade emission permits. So ESOS, again, that's your energy savings opportunity scheme. I think that has been around for quite a while now, and it's probably quite well known. Within there, you can see the CCAs. So this is your climate change agreement. And within that, that's a government-backed initiative designed to help businesses in energy-intensive industries to reduce carbon emissions and energy consumption as well. And then we've got this CBAM, and that is your carbon border adjustment mechanism. So it is a policy designed to address carbon leakage by placing carbon price on certain imported goods, ensuring a comparable carbon cost to those produced domestically. So what the government does not want is organisations then producing part of their products abroad in order, and that's what is looking at carbon leakage within it. We've also got financial investors. Decisions are increasingly concerned with carbon reduction. Any financial, a lot of banks are now looking at green loans. For a lot of organisations, they're looking at green loans as well. And again, from your finance, there's grants, there's capital alliances, and like I spoke about, enhanced loans may be available. I certainly do know there is green loans for organisations. More of the banks are getting involved with a lot of companies and a lot of organisations to look at what they're doing for their carbon footprint. And that's just as an ongoing conversation and getting buy-in from the local businesses as well in relation to what they're currently doing. So on to our next slide. So depending on your energy consumption, now may be a good time to invest in on-site micro renewable generation technologies. So that's providing a carbon-free energy. So looking at your electricity and gas costs are obviously very high. The cost of technologies such as photovoltaic and solar thermal panels, small wind turbines as well, and these are all elements for an organisation to implement within the company. We do see a lot of our clients, and they are installing solar panels as well. Some of them are doing wind turbines. Obviously, there is the issue with wind turbines that it looks at planning. You're looking at your full life cycle of that. I know personally, where I live here, we built our house and we have installed solar panels. Now they're purely to heat water. Whenever we done a full cost analysis of what it was going to be to install, what it was going to actually cost on savings year on year, and we did have quite a big quick payback. That was just personally. Just personally, from even a house perspective, what we done was we installed quite a bit of solar. Well, we've obviously installed solar panels, but LED lighting everywhere within our house, and we have different time zones and different zones as well for heating the house as well. So different options, and I would always use, you don't necessarily have to do massive investments as well in some places. So if you have the space, such as a roof facing a suitable direction or an unused or unshaded field or yard area, then the return on investment can be actually quite quick as well. The availability and cost of storage batteries has improved in recent years. So by investing in your battery capacity for your generated electricity, you can store it as it's generated and then use it whenever you've got peak seasons as well. So whenever you're not using it, you can have it stored and then use it for later use. And often your excess generated electricity can be sold back into the grid as well. So looking here, we're just looking at our payback time. So this is looking at an annual consumption there of just over 2 million kilowatt hours. This is a 7-year HP finance. They've looked at the install cost. These have got a 25-year lifespan, minimal maintenance and operating cost, and then cash positive after year 1, and it's just looking at the pure calculations of it all. Again, with a 5-year finance on it, looking at the different options. So it's basically looking at how much is it going to cost, how much is your finance as well, that has to be considered within it, and what is your savings year on year. And every organisation would obviously be doing certain, especially with a large capital investment, would be looking at this in order to be able to look at your payback. Okay, and then this here one is purely self-funded, and your payback then is 3 years and 2 months within the same for the same payback. So energy efficient technologies are now commonplace and lower cost than in the past. So undertaking relamping projects. One project I do actually quite openly speak about. I was out in an organisation and we were doing a 14001 audit. It wasn't a greenhouse gas, it was a number of years ago. And the company quickly said to me, they were looking at monitoring and measurement of their electricity, and they were installing sensor lights. They had installed some LED lighting, but in one part of the area they actually hadn't got around to the lighting. And he said to me, I was like, it's really bright in here. And he surprisingly said, he goes, we just painted our walls white. And he goes, the skylights and the roof was black, and we cleaned our skylights, so more natural light was actually getting in. And they had reduced their electricity because it was all separate sheds, and they had reduced their electricity in that one shed purely from cleaning and painting the place in a much brighter colour. So it was quite a small investment that they actually had, but did quite a quick payback time on that. So what I would always encourage any organisations, it doesn't have to be massive amount of capital investment in order to get quite quick wins within this. So other considerations may be improved insulation levels, installing heat recovery systems in HVAC, flues and air compressor exhaust, use the heat as well of it, installing double or triple glazing, replacing old boilers with more efficient models, looking at alternative fuels such as replacing oil-fired boilers or plant with HVO or biomass, implementing improved heating and control systems, or simply a switch off campaign, and they can all yield quite quick benefits as well. Like I've said, whenever we built this house, we're in it about 14 years. Well, actually, we are in it 14 years. And I do always say this, and I probably do laugh. My husband does not like to spend too much money. And he done all his calculations of what it was going to cost. So we have, we're not in a A-rated house, but we're quite close to it, only because I wanted my windows to open, and I'm very lucky today that they are open. And so we do have quite a bit of, we have got a lot of glass in our house, so we're taking in natural light and heat as well. We did go for oil boiler. We had done all our calculations for our ground source heat pumps at the time, and it just wasn't viable for us, the ground source heat pump. We had looked at, we obviously have got LED lightings, and we have different zones for our heating as well. So we're not heating the full house for areas we're not in the winter time. And the only thing I can say is our electricity on a monthly basis would be £40 a month. comparable to other houses, that's quite a lot less. Even from our heating, we do have oil because just purely where we are based, and it was the right choice at that time. And we look at £700. So we go through maximum about 1,000 litres in a full year. And that is in a 4-bed house out in the countryside. So it's looking at different options and what they can actually save monetary wise as well. And it doesn't have to be all quite expensive options for doing any changeovers. With a lot of organisations, what we're seeing is obviously if it's an old office building, they are doing some of the glazing, they're replacing boilers, etc. But the big one we do see quite a bit is the switch off campaign as well. So the cost of electric cars and plant continue to slowly fall, whilst their range continues to increase. So considering a full life cycle cost approach while replacing diesel and petrol cars often can be a quick win in carbon terms. So we do see this in a lot of organisations. In company vehicles, so a lot of company vehicles is moving from diesel and petrol to fully electric or even at least hybrid vehicles. There's the incentive from a benefit in kind in relation to go in that aspect as well. So it's quite an easy buy-in for employees from a benefit in kind, but also from a carbon perspective as well. Just depends on the employee, the amount of miles, etc. But a lot of organisations is doing that as well. So with changes to red diesel taxation in recent years, you might also consider replacing your diesel, the likes of your forklift trucks, with more battery powered alternatives as well. So we're seeing a lot of battery powered, we're seeing a lot of them being replaced, the forklifts in a lot of organisations. So not all greenhouse gases are equal. So the global warming potential, which I spoke about previously, or the potency in terms of contribution to climate change of some gases is much higher than others. So for example, many gases used in air conditioning, blast chillers and refrigerated warehouses can be very potent if allowed to leak or escape from pressurized systems, which is very common as well. These can be seen from service records. Whenever we go for any verifications, we always look to see, do they have any air conditioning units? Do they have any chillers? And we're looking to see those service records. We're not looking to see that they're specifically serviced and they're running efficiently, because that's an environmental aspect. What I'm looking at here, has there been any leakage? So we're looking to see, has it been refilled, and the quantity it's been refilled, obviously, because it's leaked. So preventative maintenance is essential and also often required. By removing the need for space cooling, installing air source or ground source heating and cooling, or replacing F-gases in existing systems, will drop in replacements with much lower global warming potential and can all help to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. So anything that's being done in there in relation to it will reduce your overall carbon footprint as well. So engaging with your supply chain and working collaboratively to decarbonise can prove highly effective. I was out with an organisation last year, last year maybe, yes, it would have been last year now, and they had part of their downstream transportation, so they were delivering some of their stock to certain clients, and they were chatting to another different organisation at one of these business events. And this other organisation was also doing that, but they were doing half loads. And this company I was out with said, but we're doing half loads and we're basically going nearly the same route as you. So the two organisations actually teamed up, and they do a delivery, maybe 1 delivery, 2 deliveries a week, and they basically team up on those deliveries and deliver to the same areas. And it's one way of actually reducing it as well, rather than one full lorry. traveling to one organisation or one location and coming back again, they've teamed up now. So often a large proportion of your Scope 3 emissions will be your suppliers' Scope 1 and 2. So working with your supply chain to maximise these efforts can be tricky, but it can be very effective. You can understand why now PPN 06-21 is looking at supply chain, because if you have your suppliers and you have them on board and they are reducing their carbon footprint, obviously that's reducing yours as well. So all of the ISO greenhouse gas standards are concerned with avoiding double counting. I was out with an organisation. Now they were building, so I was out with them. I was doing a site visit, and it was a construction firm. So within the construction firm, whenever I went to the physical site, I had to log in my details, and in it was I had to log in my mileage, what kind of car, roughly what car I was traveling to. And I said, why are you looking at that? And the large organisation, the large organisation said, we're looking at our carbon footprint. And I said to them, look, we do this NQA as an organisation are carbon neutral, and we already account for my all of my emissions for coming here today. And they were like, don't worry, we have to do it. And I was trying to explain double counting with them. So they were they were basically accounting for me traveling there. However, NQA had already accounted for me as well. So what I would always say is just be very mindful of your supply chain as well, and if they are accounting for it, because we don't want to do double counting, and that is a prime example there I have just given of double counting. So employee commuting may be considered as part of your supply chain. One of the most controversial ones, I have to say, from any of our organisations, and if we're going out for the very first year, is, you know, why do we account for employee commuting? We've no control over them. But you don't have, and you can't produce a product or a service without an employee. So I always do say, if you have employees, they are part of your supply chain. So the greenhouse gas emissions associated with this are often significant. So there's car sharing, look at travel planning, bike loans, EV charging points now as well is quite a big one for a lot of organisations to actually install, and home working as well. Advantages of home working, it still has to be accounted for, but it is considerably less than somebody actually travelling as well, even if it's reduced by a couple of days. So you establish your procurement criteria and expectations, and also your capital good purchases in your carbon accounts as well. So capital goods must be considered as well. So our waste streams can often make a significant contribution to your greenhouse gas, particularly due to methane emissions during the decomposition of organic waste. So very much into looking at this is overlapping here with 14,001 environmental management system. So take action to segregate your waste, minimize that waste. If you're minimizing that waste, you're also maybe minimizing some of the rework, or maybe not even necessarily rework, but offcuts, etc. So some of that is money sitting in that bin as well. So you're always trying to minimize your waste. Prevent it from going to landfill, and participate in waste exchanges as well. So looking to see where it's actually going to, and all can help to decarbonize. Although often slightly more expensive, entering into a suitable renewable energy supply contract as well. So it is very common for us to go out to organisations, and one of the objectives they have within their carbon reduction plan is to look at their electricity. And it can be also your gas as well. So they're looking at that, and they can purchase green electricity or biogas as well. So they're looking at how they're actually going to do it. Now, it is more expensive to purchase, so it isn't always, from a monetary perspective, it may not always be justified and be allowed within different organisations. So it involves the grid being supplied with an efficient quantity of renewable energy, for example, your gas and or biogas, electricity and or biogas, as your company draws from it. It in turn promotes the national investment in renewable electric energy infrastructure. However, a word of caution though, if you're using ISO 14064-1 as your mechanism for quantifying your greenhouse gas emissions, please bear in mind you must report using location-based approach, i.e. using the grid carbon conversion factor. But you can also report your emissions using a market-based approach which accounts for the renewable contract supplies. So it's an area under 14064. You must obviously look at your carbon from a location-based approach as well. So business travel is often significant. I have found a reduction in this in relation to COVID, and probably one of the massive benefits came out of COVID was the likes of Teams and meetings, that they're online meetings, etc. And it is more acceptable now. So a lot of business travel has reduced since then. However, it's still there. So where possible, utilise technology to complete any meetings or work activities to mitigate the impact of overseas travels, overnight stays as well, and any long journeys. And then obviously consider if company cars can be replaced with EV cars as well. So your carbon credits, so the pros and cons of your carbon removals and carbon offsets. So carbon credits are generally used for making claims for carbon neutrality. So they're used for both PAS 2060 and the ISO 14068-1. So carbon credits are sold on a voluntary carbon credit market by organisations, projects or individuals to fund their projects. So generally speaking, there's two types. There's ex post. So these are carbon credits that represent reductions or removals that have already occurred. And then the other one is their carbon reductions or carbon removals that will take place in the future. So for example, is the reforestation project will issue carbon credits against an expected carbon benefit they have calculated for as well. So a number of different schemes within there. So a carbon credit is a tradable certificate representing 1 tonne of carbon dioxide equivalent from greenhouse gas emissions reductions or greenhouse gas removal enhancements. So a carbon credit can be of different types. There's avoidance credits, carbon reduction credits or removals. So a carbon removal is the withdrawal of a greenhouse gas from the atmosphere by a greenhouse gas sink. So an example of this carbon removal can be achieved including the reforestation, so any sustainable bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, and also direct air capture and storage as well. So carbon offsets, that is counterbalancing of a carbon footprint by retiring a carbon credit. So it's the final step in the process of offsetting is to retire the carbon credits in a public registry. So the term retire results in the outcome of ensuring that the carbon credit cannot be used again or be further traded as well. So avoidance, prevention, offset. So renewable energy developments by generating clean energy, they displace the need for fossil fuels. We've also got improvements in energy efficiency. So initiatives focused on better insulation in buildings or promoting fuel efficient vehicles as well. So removals engineered, so they're direct air capture, so extracts CO2 directly from the atmosphere. So we've got also concrete constitutes changes for increased carbon storage. We've got mineral carbon, so that's accelerating your conversions to Permian storage, and carbon capture stroke destruction. It converts your greenhouse gases into less damaging forms or captures and stores them. So removals is carbon removal projects will leverage the Earth's own process to absorb and store more CO2. So some examples there is looking at your bioenergy from your CCS, enhanced weathering, so crushed rock application to soil, ocean fertilization, etc. as well. So the voluntary carbon credit market is largely unregulated, so caution is definitely required. Generally speaking, there's good quality credits should have the following. They should be third-party verified and validated. They should result in a biodiversity benefit. They should result in water quality benefits. They should result in public access benefits, and they should align with UN SDGs as well. Whenever we do any organisation and they are going down the route of PAS 2060 or also ISO 14068, we do check their offsets and what they have actually purchased as well. So there's efforts underway to clamp down on greenwashing claims. So the EU Empowering Consumers Directive focuses on consumer protection by prohibiting misleading environmental claims. The EU Green Claims Directive emphasises environmental integrity, setting specific requirements for the use of environmental claims. And the EU stipulates that any environmental claim, including those about carbon neutrality, must be based on clear, objective and publicly available commitments, accompanied by a detailed and realistic implementation plan, verified by an independent third party with expertise in environmental issues, and these ensure that the claims are not only credible but also genuinely contribute to environmental sustainability. As I said, as a lead verifier, we do these checks on our organisations that we do. Whenever we are doing any verifications, we're looking at, I'll go back to my old scopes, scope 1, 2 and 3, and specifically within scope 3, we will look to see what the organisation has included or what they have excluded as well. We will specifically look at all of those details, and we obviously take a sample and we check all of their calculations, etc. And afterwards then we do check their offsets, where they have purchased, all the details in behind them. If they've used a different scheme, we do all the due diligence in relation to that ourselves, so we can actually put NQA's name to any organisation that has went through our process, because we do have to put our names on those certificates. Depends on who's the lead verifier or who's doing a post verification, our names actually goes on those certificates, so we have to be accountable as well for part of it. So carbon credit requirements in PAS 2060 and ISO 14068. So PAS 2060 requires hierarchy of quantify, that's using your ISO 14064, then reduce, and then and only then offset your residual emissions. PAS 2060 has the following requirements for carbon credits. It has the gold standard, the verified carbon standard, the woodland carbon code, It also has the joint implementation, emissions reduction units, EU allowances, climate and community and biodiversity standards as well. So it already, within PAS 2060, in one of the annexes, it details some of the carbon credits it recognises. Under ISO 14068-1, it requires a hierarchy of quantify using ISO 14064-1, then reduce, then remove, and only then offset residual emissions. So ISO 14068-1 has the following requirements for carbon credits. Additionality, permeance, measurable as per ISO 14064-2 certified. Vintage is no more than 5 years prior to the start of the period for which the entity is claiming carbon neutrality. Retired no later than 12 months after the end of the reporting period. And only carbon credits that represent reductions or removals that have already occurred, i.e. ex post carbon credits. And a carbon crediting programme must be transparent, on a public register, traceable, avoid double counting and minimise leakage as well. So it has went a step further. Now, PAS 2060 is it's no longer going to be done by the end of this year. It is then changing over to the ISO 14068. So preparing your greenhouse gas report and other documentation requirements. So there's mandatory documentation requirements for verifications to the ISO standards. So the main ones is for your ISO 14064-1, it's your greenhouse gas inventory, which we discussed at part 2. It also requires an information management procedure. So it describing and controlling your greenhouse gas quantification methodology. A greenhouse gas report, and that is a standalone document intended to communicate your greenhouse gas related information to its intended users, and then the optional one within there is a carbon reduction plan. So for your ISO 14068-1, you must have a greenhouse gas inventory, you must have a carbon neutrality management plan, and a carbon neutrality report. For PAS 2060, you must have a greenhouse gas inventory, a carbon footprint management plan, and a quantifying explanatory statement. Now, within ISO 14068-1 and PAS 2060, terminology is slightly different within those. However, they're very similar within each of them. It's just the terminology of how they've actually worded them is slightly different. So your verification options, what is available to any organisation? So a robust verification for your greenhouse gas inventory is looking at your reporting and other arrangements. It provides credibility, risk reduction, enhanced reputation and improved competitiveness. So ISO 14064-1 defines verification as a process for evaluating a statement of historical data and information to determine if the statement is materially correct and conforms to criteria. So it especially avoids marking your own homework. So there's 3 options. So an independent third-party accredited verification, second-party verification or self-verification. I have been doing this for a number of years, and I've been an auditor assessor for quite a while now, but I've been doing the greenhouse gas for a number of years. And there's very few organisations I go into, and whenever I'm going through their greenhouse gas inventory, that there isn't errors within it. The most common errors is a wrong conversion factor had been used. It could be some of the calculations from invoices, etc., had been input incorrectly. And one of the most common mistakes is an area hadn't even been considered. A source, a greenhouse gas source hadn't been considered. And as independent assessors and verifiers within greenhouse gas, part of it is we see that and there is findings raised. So it is very different than an ISO audit. We do raise findings, and the findings must be closed out before any certificate, it's called actually VOS, is given out. So before any certificate can be issued out, all the findings must be closed out. It is very different process than a typical audit, and I do always say that. I always say that before we do any pre-verifications for any organisation. It is a very different process. We are not consultants. However, it is a very fluid process. If there is a finding raised and we raise the finding and there's an error, for example, in a conversion factor, the client will sit and they will update that, and they will do that. Well, they may do it in front of us. It just depends on how many findings, and then they will issue the updated records back to us again for us to close out that finding, and that is all done over the course of a verification. It is not done like a year afterwards. It is done at that time. If additional time needs added on, that's whenever additional time is added on, or if it's a case of there's that many findings, we may stop a verification early and reduce it maybe by a day and use a day later. It doesn't happen too often that a lot of organisations tend to be able to close them out during the course of a verification as well. So that element does catch a lot of organisations we go into the very first time, because it is a very different process and is a very different ethos for them as well, to be able to rectify something immediately or certainly over the course of a verification as well. So what does verification with NQA look like? So we are a UCAS accredited verification body. I should know we are definitely UCAS accredited because I had a witness UCAS audit in relation to PAS 2060 only a couple of months ago. So it provides an independent third-party accredited greenhouse gas verification, and it is controlled by ISO 14064-3. So that's the specification for the verification of greenhouse gas statements. ISO 14066, that's competency requirements for teams verifying environmental information, and ISO 14065 and ISO 17029 requirements for bodies verifying environmental information. For us, UCAS looks at all our competency codes, all of our training, all of our CPD, specifically to greenhouse gas. And part of it is we just can't go out to do greenhouse gas verifications. One, we have to be trained, whether that externally and also internally, and then we have to shadow any lead verifiers as well. So we go out as part of that, and we will be basically sitting side by side with a lead verifier, seeing how they're actually doing it. So it's on the job training for us as well, and then we're witnessed. And that is the exact same process we go through for greenhouse gas verification as we do for a normal ISO standard, and that's for every standard we do. So it is for us, there's a lot of mechanisms we have to go through and a lot of records we have to actually show UCAS whenever they come to do the audits on NQA. So part of it is from yourselves, anybody using that. That's what we have to go through in the background. So again, for any organisation coming to us, so there's the application and the quote. There's a duration, and obviously therefore a cost is depending on a different levels here. So I'm going to look and go through them. So assurance level, whether it's limited or reasonable levels. Okay. With that, whenever you're looking at it, you may not understand what limited or reasonable levels are. So limited will be that we take a sample. Okay, and I keep saying we take a sample. Reasonable is that we're actually increasing that levels as well. So the number of sites within your organisation and your reporting boundaries as well, your scale of your emissions in tonnes of CO2 equivalent, and the number of greenhouse gas emission sources. Also, there's the sector risk and data accounting, how complex it is. So that's part of what we look at. Whenever any quotation is done within an organisation, that then has to be signed off by, at the moment, there's a couple of us within NQA can sign those completely off. So the person doing the quote then has that double checked as well. So the verification process, it starts off with a pre-verification, and this is year on year. A pre-verification is typically a half a day to 1 day. And what we do in a pre-verification is we look at your top levels. So we do an overview, we look at any of your greenhouse gas sources, we conduct a risk assessment, and we plan as well for your main verification. So part of your risk assessment we carry out, we look at all of your greenhouse gas sources and we risk assess those. We look at your main greenhouse gas sources, your highest levels, and that's whenever we start to focus on those. So for example, if I have a company and they just, I'm going to simplify this quite simple, in total they've only maybe got 50 tonnes of CO2 equivalent, and within that 50 tonnes, 20 is accounted for electricity, 10 is for employee commuting, and the rest may be waste, etc. So we will focus a larger sample size on our electricity because it's our highest source. So that's all we're meaning by a risk assessment. We're also considering in there whether it is primary or secondary information we're getting, whether it's pure invoices, if we're able to see meter readings, etc., or if there's assumptions made in there as well. So a verification then typically is greater than 2 days. Site visits is, we do a site walkabout, and it's to verify your greenhouse gas sources. There's a data sampling and testing, a review as well of the documentation for conformance. So like I said, I was out doing one yesterday. It was a 2-day verification. I did have a colleague with me as well yesterday, and we obviously did do a small walkabout of the site. It was quite a small office-based environment, and that was completed yesterday. He is now going to purchase offsets because it was a past 2060, and then we have a post-verification. So a post-verification typically is a half a day, and it's an independent review. So that is somebody within NQA who is a lead verifier who has not conducted any element of that verification. So they have not been involved in the verification, they've not been involved in the pre-verification, so they can go in and independently review the documents we have done as part of our verification. And the outcome from that is called a VOS. So it's a verification opinion statement, and that is for historical data period. So our approach is constructive and it is value adding at all times. No matter whether that be a greenhouse gas inventory or doing any sort of audits, my approach is certainly to be, it must add value to any organisation. You have to gain value out of it. So some case studies quickly we will look at here. They're available on the NQA website. So some organisations, we do have authorisation to use these, might I add. So Weatherhead, we've also got Affinity Water, we've got Richardson Healthcare, we have got Renewable UK, Unicorn Group, Auditel as well. So a number of these different companies, and they can all be viewed on our website as well for ease of reading. Some very good reads in there. So again, I'm literally over again, as I've told the guys in the background, I do talk. Again, if there is any queries, any questions, please do feel free to ask in the there's info@nqa.com, and also we do put up anything on our Twitter and LinkedIn as well. I'm just seeing there's not too many actual questions in here, and if there is anything, I know I'm very much tight on time here. What I would say, any questions, always do feel free, please. And if you are looking at going ahead with any greenhouse gas inventory and you do have any questions, please do feel free to ask in to us. As I've said, I am on LinkedIn. My name is Clara Braham under LinkedIn, and I am obviously with NQA. I am a full-time employee with NQA. There's the email address info@nqa.com, and there also is to the training department, which is just training@nqa.com. So it is quite simple. If there is any questions from it, or even for going forward, because sometimes we do have organisations, even for going forward, that does have some questions whenever they're starting to do their inventory. Please always do feel free. If there's anything we are able to assist you with, we most certainly will as well. All right, I would like to thank you for your time. If there is any further courses, all are readily available on our website as well, any further training that you would like to attend. Okay, I would like to thank everybody for their time, and also thank you to everybody that has been involved. It is the end of part 3. I hope you all have an absolutely fantastic weekend. I know the weather is it is literally glorious here. And apologies if you heard any people in the background. I have my windows open in the house. I did state I do like my windows open in our house. So thank you for your time, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you and goodbye.